in effect in a number of communities throughout the state of Florida. If you're on that west coast of Florida and barrier islands, just assume that you likely are going to be called upon to evacuate.
So again, that importance of knowing your zone is critical to survival, and that is not a dramatic statement. That is reality. People die during storms all the time because of the storm surge. As we go back into Molly, it's always interesting to think. You think of a hurricane, you think of wind, right? It's not the wind that's the deadliest part of these storms. It's the water every single time without fail. And that storm surge is truly the most deadly part. And knowing your zone will save lives. Molly, into you.
And knowing your zone is important, and that's why we want to start with that information, Justin, because you can find that information at floridadisaster.org. I know a lot of people just went through Helene, but if you need to know your evacuation zone, you can go to that website. You can find all the information that you need. Now, some things maybe you need to be thinking about is you know, knowing your home, knowing your elevation. All of those things are things you can look at now and make a decision that is best for you and your family. But I'm telling you, if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone, you need to go. You need to go, bottom line. And some of the things to think about as far as building that hurricane kit. Hopefully you already have it and you've been able to get some of the supplies this weekend. But if you're still putting it together, 1 gallon of water per person per day for 7 days. Remember, you have to plan not just for riding out the storm, but also what could happen afterwards. Extended power outages, maybe, you know, not being able to find water at some of the grocery stores. Non-perishable foods, including for babies and pets, getting those prescriptions filled, and cash. None of us carry cash these days, but what happens when the power goes out? You can't use credit cards, so having cash is key. And having the first aid kit, a NOAA weather radio is going to be important during power outages to get some of that information. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get power now. Some of the solar power, you know, small little compact areas that you can charge and get some extra charge on your phone so you can still communicate. All of those things you need to be thinking about. Well, we have those storm surge watches and those hurricane watches out. And what that means, Alex, is 48 hours until we start to see impacts.
Absolutely. So, yeah, not a whole lot of time, that is for sure. Well, you know, one thing, travel, that could get dicey during and, of course, after landfall across the Florida peninsula. Right now, just regular showers are kind of slowing things down for parts of the 4 corridor here to the Keys. Now, for airline passengers, you'll want to check ahead now to see what you need to do in case your flight gets canceled in the next 48 hours. Speaking of canceled, we got the whole Tampa airport that's shutting down for Tuesday morning. I believe 9 a.m. they're going to be closing down Tampa at the airport there. So already starting to see some of the impacts there at the airports, and we'll more than likely see more, of course, as we get this system a little bit closer. The rest of the nation, here's what we expect for today, where we could see some more of those showers and thunderstorms that may flare up there. Orlando's a spot that could see some delays. Also up into New England, heads up around Boston, maybe some slight delays, and down towards Los Angeles there in at least Southern California. Outside of those couple of spots, the rest of the nation actually looks pretty good for our travels. Roadway travels here for us today here, and going to be a lot of folks who are maybe trying to get out of harm's way from the West Coast are already seeing some of those evacuation orders starting to get issued. Well, you do notice there is going to be the risk for showers as well as thunderstorms. Southern tip probably looking for a bit more of a bigger risk showing up there. Heavy downpours, those tropical downpours here and lightly being the big risks. But if you're working your way again northbound along 75, the 4 corridor, 95 as well, you may run in and out of some of those showers as well as thunderstorms for today. Hot and humid times out there for us as well. Tomorrow, it's more of the same, maybe even the chance that we could see some stronger storms developing, trying to push on through with some gusty winds. Again, as we watch Milton get closer and closer, we'll see our rain opportunities start to go up as well. Not only, again, the rain coming down, but come down heavily. Look at the threat here for flooding. This is just for today into tomorrow morning. It's actually the southeastern portion of Florida that's facing that risk, likely to deal with some flash flooding there, and then the possibility extends all the way northbound up towards even around Jacksonville. We'll keep an eye on those spots for tomorrow into Wednesday. Now we include most of the peninsula here with that risk for a possibility of flash flooding here, and again, that extends from the Keys north of Interstate 4 up into the Jacksonville area as well. So we got a lot to follow here, and of course the Weather Channel's team of trained meteorologists and photojournalists is going to be out live to bring you the very latest information as well as show you what is happening throughout the duration of this event.
America, only on the Weather Channel.
Currently in our area, 63 degrees under sunny skies. Today, sunny, high 71. Winds north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, generally clear, low 44. Winds north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tuesday, a mainly sunny sky, high 74. Winds northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Well, places like Seminole, not far from Tampa, are getting sandbags to protect their homes and businesses. Some people learned their lesson from Hurricane Helene and are not taking chances this time.
I'm out here to fill up my sandbags. I didn't do it last time, and this time I want to feel better inside my home and hopefully protect some of my stuff. Water got up into our driveway, and I don't want it to happen.
Just in terms of preparation, you just got to do what you can early and just get out there, and it is what it is, right?
If they say evacuate, you probably should evacuate, because otherwise you're not going to be able to once the water starts getting up.
Yeah, this is all really good advice, and we need to prepare for a major hurricane landfall coming into the west coast of Florida on Thursday, and of course the worst of the weather even arriving a little before then. But let me give you the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center, 155 Cat 4. This is soon going to be upgraded, I think, to a Cat 5, because right now the hurricane hunters are in there and they're finding some incredible data with a pressure actually right now somewhere around 924 millibars, right? So you can kind of cross that off your list and continue this pressure tank, which means the winds come up, and we're seeing flight level winds come in at over 150 knots, which is about 180 miles per hour. So this is very likely a Category 5 right now as we're speaking. It is no surprise that we're seeing this rapid intensification continue. There's a lot of data out there that suggests we may not be quite done yet. One of the reasons that this is so intense is you can see the incredible clearing of the eye, this pinhole of an eye, a tiny little eye, all of a sudden nearly cloud-free. There's a lot of sinking air right in the middle of this that is warming it right in the middle of it and lowering the pressure, because warm air is less dense than colder air, and the pressure underneath that eye is continuing to come down because the air is sinking on it, believe it or not. And with that lowering of the pressure, the winds crank up in response. There are a lot of atmospheric reasons and oceanic reasons I'll get to coming up at the top of the hour. But one of the reasons why I think we're not maybe done strengthening is look at the lightning encircling the eye almost symmetrically, right? That is telling us vigorous convection has now encapsulated and encircled completely the center of lowest pressure. And we're going to continue to force that air downward and warm the interior even more, lowering the pressure and strengthening the wind. This Hurricane Hunter Pass, about ready, I've just showed you, this is not the most updated. As I mentioned, it's not 933 anymore. It's somewhere in the mid-920s. This number is not 146 anymore. It's well into the 150s or above that. This is a remarkable deepening rate, the kind that I can't remember seeing in my adulthood. So this is something very, very significant. And thankfully for now, we're not seeing the strengthening of the winds along the northern Yucatan, but that's because the hurricane hasn't gotten there. Thankfully right now, the most intense part of the hurricane is very tightly concentrated around the center, and we can only hope that tonight and tomorrow morning it bypasses the Yucatan. But unfortunately, the worst part of this hurricane is coming to Florida. This is one model solution. There are a lot of other ones that we need to pay attention to. There is room for the hurricane to go even north of Tampa, the center of it, and that matters so much, because remember, the worst wind and the worst surge comes along and to the right, in this case the south of where the center goes, and this could be a very dire situation for Tampa. Again, there's room and uncertainty, a lot of it left in this forecast, but do note that the landfall of a major hurricane is in all likelihood coming for Florida and Tampa. We just don't know yet, and areas nearby where the center is going to go, because that matters who gets the absolute worst of all of it. Guys, back to you.
And the angle of approach, too, is very harsh, and that will only ramp up the surge concerns. Let's talk about the freshwater flooding potential, because we're not walking in to this event with a lot of dry ground.
No, I mean, talk about it. I mean, it's been very wet out there for the year. Look at some of these totals here and the surplus this year. We're talking in places like Tampa, Fort Myers, surplus is up over 20 inches. The one spot that stands out, Orlando, where we're down a bit, so we could use some rain, but when you start talking tropical cyclones, yeah, you don't want this much.
Absolutely not this much. I mean, it's going to cause problems no matter where you are, even if you're in a deficit, but especially if you're in one of those big surpluses. We have rain today. We've had rain throughout the weekend. This is not associated with Hurricane Milton. This is just general atmospheric moisture that's been hanging out over the Sunshine State, causing problems with preparations, causing problems with clearing the debris from Hurricane Helene, and it's also laying the groundwork for a flooding situation.
Yeah, flood watch is up across most of the peninsula. Some of the rainfall totals, the European has one solution, the American GFS has another solution, but some heavy rain coming in along the path of this hurricane. Breaking now, when it comes to Hurricane Milton, we now have a Category 5 hurricane. Latest update from the National Hurricane Center. The hurricane hunters, they've been flying through this and sampling what's been going on, and they just continue to find this thing strengthening, bottoming out here. Now we can see what's going on. 160-mile-per-hour winds, Category 5 hurricane. And I mean, look at this thing. Look at that eye, as clear as day now. You can clearly see the eye that is fully formed, and just the incredible convection surrounding that as well. We have watched this thing really just blossom here just in the last several hours. The 5 o'clock advisory, it was a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane. Central pressure was down around 972. 8 o'clock advisory, so just 3 hours later, it had jumped up 150-mile-per-hour winds. Central pressure down to 940, and now look at where it is. 160 with the winds. Pressure down to 925. This is one of the fastest, rapidly intensifying hurricanes on record, for sure. This is a monster of a storm. Unfortunately, right now, not impacting land, thank goodness, but it is forecast to kind of skirt right along and just north of the Yucatan. That's in the forecast here, so we'll be watching that very closely as it moves in that direction. And then, as it tracks its way across the eastern parts of the Gulf of Mexico, you do start to notice, again, a big turn to the north and the east, but you also see, in the forecast, at least the official forecast, calling for those wind speeds to come down. Again, that's just the forecast. Doesn't mean that's going to be God's truth and exactly what happens, but the general theme is to see those wind speeds coming down. But I don't want that to let your guard down and think, oh, okay, we're out of the woods. Not by any stretch. We still, as it tries to work its way on in here Wednesday evening, still talking about a major hurricane coming on into the west coast of Florida. So either way, how you slice it here, even if it is less strong than where it is now, this is still a very powerful hurricane coming into a very vulnerable part of the country here when it comes to surge. That is one of the spots that we're very vulnerable here on the west coast of Florida. So there are some of the alerts that are in place right now. We've got hurricane watches that are not just here along the coast, because we could be talking hurricane conditions here. That's at least a possibility reaching far inland. So now we've got Tampa, Fort Myers, Cedar Key all in that, and points in between, but also you can see now, Orlando, you're under a hurricane watch because we could see hurricane conditions coming into the central parts of the state. And then you can see farther to the south, the far southern portions of Florida dealing with tropical storm watches, and then also northbound up around the Big Bend area, areas that were just impacted by a landfalling Helene, dealing with a tropical storm watch, because we at least have the possibility for tropical storm conditions showing up there. Seeing some rain right now, not in association with what's going on with Milton, but some of that wet weather has been coming into the west coast of Florida, the southwest portions of Florida, I should say. And we'll see that here through the next couple of hours, moving from essentially west to east. That clears out, and most of the peninsula gets a bit of a quieter spell as we await now the main core of what's going on with Milton. The future radar shows you here, again, this is one model solution, by Thursday morning now, really starting to see that core coming in. But even before that, there'll be some outer bands that'll swing on in. They will bring with them their own heavier downpours, the gusty winds, possibility for even a few isolated tornadoes. We have to watch out for that threat. But there's that main core coming in. And again, don't get too caught in exactly where this is heading in, because again, this could change a bit as we work our way in towards that time frame. Just being prepared for that major hurricane is going to be the key here. Storm surge watches, they are up again along the entire west coast of Florida, for the most part from Cedar Key all the way farther south here into the south portions of the state. And look at some of the storm surge potential values that we could see. And again, this is a sort of a reasonable worst case scenario. If you saw that biggest push of water with the strongest winds coinciding with high tide, these are some of the values that we could see peaking here and maximize 8 to 12-foot storm surge. And that does include us. Tampa, St. Pete, back over towards Clearwater, Sarasota, you're in there as well. And remember what we just came off of, Hurricane Helene, that brought, and again, that was well off towards our west, that brought in 4, 6, up to 7-foot storm surge there in that Tampa area. We could be maybe even doubling that in some cases. So very, very impactful. And even in the areas where it's maybe not as high, these are still life-threatening storm surge values, even to the north and south of that. So, Dr. Postell, this is a very, very dangerous hurricane that is poised to make its way on into the west coast of Florida.
Alex, you're right. There's no way around it. We're going to have life-threatening, dangerous inundation across much of the west coast of Florida, with the landfall coming likely on Thursday at some point from Hurricane Milton. Now, exactly who gets the worst storm surge, the most inundation, it's going to really depend on where the center goes. It's a bit too far out to really narrow that down right now, but Alex's graphic was spot on for now to give you a sense that a very large area is at dangerous risk for seeing that kind of surge. And the reason why is because we have a Category 5 hurricane right now in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Not likely to be a Category 5 at landfall, but still a very dangerous major hurricane with all kinds of hazards that are really, really going to be impactful. There it is. You can see it. You know what? It kind of, at this stage of its life cycle and where it is, reminds me a little bit of Hurricane Andrew. Flight level winds here, I'll just show you in a minute, are nearly what Andrew was. The size and the scope of the wind field kind of reminds me of Andrew, and the satellite presentation right in the middle of it reminds me of it. It is that kind of a Category 5 hurricane with lightning right now encircling almost symmetrically the eye, which is in the middle. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you have a lot of bad thunderstorms right circling around the middle of it, you're going to force that air downward right in the center. And as that air descends pretty quickly, it's going to warm up, and that lowers the pressure at the surface. And the pressure, we know, is really, really low right now, and the wind is in response strengthening and circulating around it very, very quickly. This is a bad vortex right now that is only going to potentially get a little bit stronger before it's maxed out. There's the Hurricane Center's most recent pass right through there, and they measured pressure somewhere around 925 millibars. Remember, Andrew was around 922 when it made landfall. Flight level winds 158 knots, which is over 180 miles per hour. This is about 7,000 or 8,000 plus feet above the surface, so maybe the winds at the surface aren't quite that strong, but with a hurricane this intense, the ratio between the flight level wind and the surface level wind, well, you can throw your traditional ratios out because there's a lot of vertical mixing, very little stability is in the way, and you can get some incredible winds at the surface in a situation like this. So this is definitely a Category 5. Again, I think Andrew's wind at flight level, the last one I saw was 166 knots. So this is right about there, circulating around. Thankfully, nowhere near land, at least not bringing any of the bad weather anywhere near land for now. But we have to watch out for a little while longer, 12 to 18 hours, I think, where the atmosphere and the ocean are going to conspire to give it a little bit more room, maybe even to get a bit stronger. Here's one of the reasons why. There is what's called a subtropical jet stream right to its north. Now, that's a little bit different than a mid-latitude jet stream over Chicago. This one is higher up, so it's not bringing a lot of wind shear through Milton right now. It is not doing that. What it's doing at the high altitudes is allowing the outflowing air from Milton to escape. Milton is exhaling very effectively. And when you can exhale, well, then you can take a deep breath and you can contract all that bad weather right into the middle of it, and we're seeing that right now happening, ongoing in front of your eyes with a top-end hurricane in the Bay of Campeche or just to its north in the southern Gulf of Mexico. It's a relatively compact storm. You can see some of the surface observations. We're not even seeing weather that's different than any other October afternoon. But we have to watch very closely where the center goes. We're thinking right now that the worst of the weather is going to remain north of the Yucatan. The core of it does. And with a hurricane like this, it's all about the eye wall when you think of the extreme damage potential. All of that is hiding in here. If you can escape the eye wall, yeah, bad weather, all kinds of impacts, but nothing what is hiding inside of that tempest called the eye wall where the Category 5 conditions are occurring. That's what we think is going to happen, thankfully, for parts of Mexico, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty even there. Then we have to talk about the impacts to the west coast of Florida. Where Milton goes is going to matter a lot. Either way, we're going to get impacts. Look, even on the East Coast. Miami, for example, could see some strong gusty winds out of the south on Thursday morning with the center of Milton so far away. Strong winds, even on the advance of Milton toward the west coast, will begin to increase along the east coast of Florida. But where exactly Milton goes, right, the center of it, we don't know yet. And that's going to matter a lot because along and to the right of where it goes, that's where the most dangerous wind and surge will come by far. There is support right now through the GFS ensemble members that a track takes it north of Tampa. That's terrible. That's the worst case scenario for Tampa in areas just to the south, like Bradenton and Sarasota. This is awful. Again, there's a couple of days to sort all this out, but we need to be mindful that the very worst of still potentially major Hurricane Milton coming on in as a absolutely life-threatening situation for many of us along the west coast of Florida. Molly, again, we have a lot of time to sort all the details out, but this is not at all what we're going to be wanting to contend with in just a couple of days.
And especially less than 2 weeks from Helene's impacts along the west coast of Florida. But we know these systems do not stop at the coast. They are inland threats as well. And this is going to drop a lot of rain in addition to seeing some very strong winds move well inland, like say to Orlando. Now, Orlando is one of the few spots right now running a rainfall deficit. But look at some of these year-to-date surpluses. We're talking Fort Myers over 22 inches, Tampa over 21 inches, and we're still seeing rain today. We're going to see rain leading up to Milton. That's complicating the efforts to prepare for Milton. It's also complicating the efforts to clean up from Helene. A lot of debris in the Tampa St. Pete area that's desperately trying to get cleared right now before we see the worst of Milton. And on top of that, all of this is laying the groundwork for what's going to be a flash flooding situation as we bring in Milton, and a life-threatening flash flooding situation depending on where the heaviest rain sets up. And Dr. Postel just made a great point that we don't know the answer to that yet. We don't know exactly where this is going to come in, and that's going to make a difference for the surge, for the wind, and for the rainfall potential. But there is a flood watch right now from Brunswick, Georgia, all the way down through South Florida. That includes Cedar Key. It includes Orlando, Tampa, Fort Myers, West Palm Beach, everywhere, all the way down to Miami. Now, this is just one model's interpretation. And as mentioned, there's still a lot of details to work out with this. But this puts a dire situation of freshwater flooding in addition to surge right over the Tampa area. Now, anywhere that we see 12 to 18, obviously we're going to have life-threatening flash flooding, but even in that range of 8 to 12, perhaps even 5 to 8, depending on where this rain falls, where it falls into the water system of the rivers and the lakes and all of those areas that we have in Florida that floods very easily. Now, the American model, completely different solution where it has this swath of heavy rain from Cedar Key all the way to Jacksonville. And I'll tell you, I have family in Jacksonville, and what I've been telling them to prepare is that this is the potential that you need to prepare for. Yes, maybe we end up with only 2 to 3 inches of rain in Jacksonville, but the potential is there to see a very high-end event when it comes to rainfall, and that's what you need to be preparing for today and tomorrow before Milton arrives. Here's the timing of the rain today. That clears out by the evening. Tuesday, we'll still see rain, not nearly as much as what we've been seeing, and that should be better to do those last-minute preparations. But then we get to late Wednesday, those preparations need to be done, and Alex, you need to be in your spot for Milton's arrival later on Wednesday into Thursday.
Absolutely. Well, you know, just 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Helene, that slammed into Florida as well. They're in the Big Bend area near Perry. Cedar Key, well, they saw a record storm surge of 9.3 inches. The old record was 6.84. Clearwater Beach, Old Port Tampa Bay, and St. Petersburg also saw a record surge. And now some of these same locations could be back in the bullseye for more surge that could top what we just saw, which of course is not what we want to be dealing with here. But unfortunately, here we are. Storm surge watches, they are up and in place here. You can see all the areas from Cedar Key pushing southbound along, again, most of that entire west coast of Florida having to contend with that. And you see some of the values, storm surge potential now. This is essentially a reasonable worst case scenario. The biggest push of water with some of the strongest winds as the hurricane comes ashore, coinciding with that high tide. That's when you could realize these values. And right now, the highest values coming in right around the Tampa area down towards Sarasota. 8 to 12 foot storm surge in that purple area. And then on either side of that, we could be looking at 5 to 10 feet just south of Cedar Key. Fort Myers, you're in the 5 to 10 foot range. Naples, how about 4 to 7 foot storm surge showing up there. And even as you work your way up along and across the Big Bend area over towards Apalachicola, 1 to 3 foot storm surge will be a possibility there, and down around the Keys also in that 1 to 3 foot range. So in any of these cases, certainly you'd be talking about life-threatening water coming on through. Of course, this is what we had to deal with when it came to Helene and its storm surge. We talked about Cedar Key and that 9.3 foot storm surge showing up there. All of the different gauges there that were in and around the Tampa area saw record value showing up. And even as we worked our way towards the East Coast, we saw water rise as well in the 1 to 2 foot range. So a lot of wide-reaching impacts from, of course, Helene. Now we've got Milton that's going to bring with it its own issues as well. So as we get into, again, a little bit closer, we're looking into the west central portions of Florida, Tampa, St. Petersburg, you got Sarasota in there as well. And we can get a little bit closer here to show you some of these values that we may be dealing with here. And again, in a lot of cases here, again, as we work our way along the west coast here, some of these barrier islands, I mean, we got a number of spots. Yellow corresponds to up to 6 feet. Orange areas, that's where we're looking at up to 9 feet. And you see some of the spots that would essentially be underwater here. I mean, these barrier islands, which again have already taken a hard hit, could be hit hard yet again there in and around Clearwater. Then we push our way back over towards the Tampa Bay area, and this is a spot where, again, we could be looking at more water values here, surge values here that are getting up into the 9 foot range. That is a real possibility. So look at all these spots that you can see the colors showing them. Those are spots that are dry now that would not be dry as we work our way in towards the mid and latter part of this week. And not just there, you head farther to the south as well. Fort Myers, the beach here. I mean, we got some of these spots in the red showing up. This is now getting above 9 feet when it comes to storm surge. So, I mean, just think about that, right? I mean, we're talking essentially doubling people in terms of how high that water could get.
Serve.com.
Currently in our area, 64 degrees under sunny skies. Today, plentiful sunshine, high 70, winds north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, generally clear, low 44. Winds north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tuesday, sunny skies, high 74. Winds northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Here's our 7-day outlook.
This hurricane season,
good heavens, absolute punishment.
every second counts.
You don't want to be on an interstate with heavy tropical downpours.
America's most trusted news network is putting your safety first with minute-by-minute coverage, keeping you ahead of the storm.
This is a dangerous hurricane.
Receive instant information from our team of meteorologists and landfall cams that bring you every angle on our TV app. This hurricane season, protecting America only on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back into the Weather Channel. Lee County has now announced mandatory evacuation orders for zones A and B, and that goes into effect at noon today. Lee County includes Fort Myers, Cape Coral, and Pine Islands, so now is the time to check to see if your area is in zones A or B. Mandatory evacuation. Every minute of preparation is going to count the next 2 days. Meteorologist Jordan Steele walks us through the important steps in the countdown to landfall.
As many of us know, the tropics have come to life. A storm is threatening, the clock is ticking. So now's the time for you to spring into action. Let's say we're 48 hours out. A hurricane watch is imminent, maybe it's just been issued. So what does that mean? Well, it means you gotta get your car filled up with gas. Make sure you have plenty of cash. And now is also the time to check your evacuation kit. Make sure you have plenty of food and water for days. Grab any last-minute items like batteries, and make sure your important documents are saved electronically and in a protective, waterproof envelope. Because at this stage of the game, time moves quickly. Before you know it, we're gonna be 24 hours from landfall. And at that point, a hurricane warning is up. The storm is gaining strength, and it's getting closer. Finish protecting the windows. You also have to clean up all that debris in the yard like I have here. Kids. And if officials say that you need to evacuate, please do so. The outer bands of the storm, they're now coming ashore. It's time to be in your safe location. Family members, friends, they need to know where you're going to be. Share your plans, and remember, at this point, all of your electronics need to be fully charged because you can expect power to be out for days. Now, from this point, the weather's going downhill fast. Landfall is upon us, and now's the time to shelter in place and ride out this storm.
And of course, you know, one of the things we'll be watching is what's going on along the coast with the surge that comes in. So we want to show you what that may look like in a few spots, including Gulfport, Florida, there in Pinellas County. This is actually an evacuation zone A. Some of that is already occurring right now. We're looking along Shore Boulevard South, which is actually an east-west oriented street here near the Boca Ciega Bay. And that basically connects to Tampa Bay. But look at what we could see here. If we were to maximize the strongest push of the water with the high tide, levels that could be getting up to 9 foot, if not even higher than that. This point, I mean, look at this. You got the Tiki Bar and Grill barely seeing the top of that. We turn our way and you look all the way back inland here. I mean, we're talking about how far some of that water could stretch. Blocks away from the actual coast itself. Got a number of different restaurants, including this one here. That's a restaurant there. That is the Neptune Grill. Then we look back into this general area. That's another restaurant as well. There, more restaurants lining this street here. This is Beach Boulevard looking northbound. And again, look how far north and away from the coast that water ends up being. Got a ice cream shop there that's in place, as well as a pizza shop, a pizza bar, coffee bar that's there as well. And in all those places I just named, all those areas are closed right now because of what we dealt with Helene. Came through and wreaked havoc on these areas. They've shut down. They're trying to clean up, but it's been a devastating situation. And now we've got to add to this what happens with Milton. It could be just absolutely a terrible mess that we could add on to that. Of course, the impacts from Milton will be also felt inland as well. And Weather Channel national correspondent Justin Michaels joins us live from Orlando, where inland communities will also need to prepare for what is ahead, Justin. This is not just a coastal issue.
No, flooding is definitely a likelihood here in the Orlando area. Because of that, you can see the sandbagging operation behind me. What you don't see from this direction is the more than mile line of cars we drove past to get here. Solid cars for more than a mile. Let's talk to Sandra Dawkins. And in order to do this interview, I promised her I would help her load up her car. So Sandra, tell me, what has this been like getting ready for yet another hurricane here in Orlando?
Well, I've only been through a couple of hurricanes, one or two. The last one was terrible. We had some roof damage and some fence damage. And right now, just the wait in line. Other than that is the back breaking of trying to lift this in the car.
Well, and tell me, what was it like to wait in that line?
Well, we talked. It's me and my mom, so we talked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long line. It's like more than a mile we drove past.
Yes.
How long did it take you?
Just about 3 hours.
3 hours
Yes.
of waiting for a trunk full of sandbags.
Yes.
Are you worried?
No.
You're not worried?
No.
That's a good position to be in.
Yes. I believe in Jesus Christ, so, hey, it's going to be what it's going to be, and He's going to always take care of it.
All right. Sandra Dawkins, we're grateful for you. I know you have a lot more work to do here, and we're grateful. We'll keep helping you load, I promise.
All right.
Okay, it's so nice to chat with you. Please stay safe during the storm,
Thank
okay?
you, you too.
All right, be careful. So, guys, it's amazing to see the team effort. This is just one pile. There's another pile down there. There's a dump truck here that's waiting to unload more sand. And this is just one sandbagging operation here in Orlando, Florida, here at Barnett Park. The Weather Channel will have more extensive live coverage of Milton as Milton gets closer and closer. Now a Category 5 hurricane approaching the peninsula of Florida. We're back after this.